I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Friday, October the 16th, 2015. An IDF soldier was moderately wounded in a stabbing attack in the West Bank today. A Palestinian posing as a member of the media, wearing a yellow press vest and carrying a camera, stabbed the soldier in his back and arm at a checkpoint near Kiryat Arba. The terrorist was shot and killed by other soldiers at the scene. The injured soldier was taken to Shaare Tzedek Medical Center in Jerusalem for treatment. The Foreign Press Association condemned the incident. They said, "We utterly deplore this violation of press privilege and call on local Palestinian media organizations to immediately verify all media credentials to ensure there are no violations." Palestinian rioters set fire this morning to the compound that houses Joseph's tomb in Nablus. Palestinian police put out the fire before IDF forces arrived at the scene. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas condemned the arson, calling it irresponsible, and said he would form a commission of inquiry on the incident. There were no injuries, but major damage was reported to the area. IDF spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner called the desecration of the holy site a blatant violation and contradiction of the basic value of freedom of worship. He said the IDF would take all measures to bring those responsible to justice. IDF forces clashed with Palestinian rioters at the Gaza border fence today, where the protesters breached the fence, and the IDF had to use riot dispersal means to control the situation. And in Ramallah, IDF soldiers traveling in an army jeep were fired at by 3 suspects. There were no injuries, though the jeep was damaged. A search for the shooters was ongoing. The Jerusalem District Prosecutor's Office yesterday charged 5 Arab teenagers accused of throwing rocks at a vehicle and ultimately killing the driver with manslaughter. If you recall, Alexander Levlovich was driving his car on Rosh Hashanah Eve in East Talpiot when it was pelted with rocks, causing him to lose control and crash. He died of his wounds shortly after. 5 residents of the Arab neighborhood of Tzurbacher were charged with manslaughter and not murder, something that outraged the family of the victim, whose son Nir told Ynet, "We can only hope for legislative changes. It seems absurd that they still think that by throwing stones they only tried to hurt him." Hundreds of Israeli Jews and Arabs gathered in northern Israel today in a show of coexistence. About 700 people stood at the Iron and Megiddo junctions under the banner Neighbors for Peace. Another 150 Arabs and Jews stood at the Carmiel junction and called for dialogue and a life of coexistence. And Israel supporters gathered yesterday across the street from the Israeli consulate in New York City to show their solidarity for the Jewish state in light of the recent wave of terror. About 200 people stood waving Israeli flags and holding signs reading, "Israel, we are with you." The rally of support was organized by Rabbi Avi Weiss of the Hebrew Institute of Riverdale on behalf of Amcha, the Coalition for Jewish Concerns. The annual town hall of the Jewish Council for Public Affairs concluded in Washington, D.C. this week. The 3-day national gathering addressed several issues, including the Syrian refugee crisis, race relations here in the U.S., and threats to Jews around the world, including the current wave of terror in Israel and the rise of anti-Semitism. The JCPA adopted several policies at the gathering, including calling for guidelines regarding the line between legitimate criticism of Israel and anti-Semitism, and what steps need to be taken when that line is crossed. And the 2nd annual National Israeli-American Conference is being held this weekend in Washington. Initiated by the Israeli-American Council, speakers at the conference include members of Congress Eliot Engel, Ed Royce, Brad Sherman, and Peter Roskam, and from Israel, head of the opposition party Isaac Herzog, and Israeli Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked. Also, Israel's ambassador to the U.S., Ron Dermer, will be speaking, as well as Ambassador Ron Prasor, who just days ago stepped down as Israel's envoy to the United Nations. A street in New York City's Washington Heights will be named for founder of the Soviet Jewry movement, Yakov Birnbaum, this Sunday. Birnbaum died last year at the age of 87. He He had escaped with his family from Hamburg, Germany to England just before the outbreak of World War II and later moved to New York, where in the 1960s he founded an organization called the Student Struggle for Soviet Jewry, spearheading the Soviet Jewry movement. On Sunday, synagogue congregations and members of the Jewish Community Council of Washington Heights, Inwood, will join Council member Idanis Rodriguez on the west side of Cabrini Boulevard at 187th Street to honor Birnbaum's legacy. And taking a look now at our programming for tonight, Friday, October the 16th, at 7:30, a Shabbat a cappella concert. At 8 o'clock, the Jerusalem Unity Prize ceremony. At 9, the film Saved by Deportation. And at 10:30, Muzika with Israeli hip-hop band Hadag Nachash. And remember, live Shabbat services are coming up at 6 o'clock from New York City's Central Synagogue. I'm Teisha Bader. Shabbat Shalom.